Hello there, Michael from Insurance Agency Automation Associates, your favorite AMS360 consultant in training. Today I wanted to show you how to run a report that helps a lot with some things I've been seeing a lot of conversation about lately. And that conversation is about data hygiene or data quality or missing data. Call it what you want. I'm a particular fan of data hygiene myself. And I'm going to look at the customer center area first in this video. There are many other ways to do some of this, but this is a way to get to there. So first I need to run a report that is in the My Agency Reports or MAR. If you don't have access to them, then that's a VSSO setting that needs to be addressed with your admin. So to start with, there's more than one way to get to that. I can go to Toolbox and then come down here to My Agency Reports, or I can hit the lightning bolt up here and come to My Agency Reports. They both go to the same place. They both take the same amount of clicks, so nothing better or worse about either one. So there's a list of 8 reports over here, and again, if you have access to My Agency Reports but not the report we're looking for, same issue. That means your settings are not right in VSSO settings to get access to this. And we're looking for this report right here, Customer Analysis. So I can do a bunch of different things to it. I can run the report. I'm going to open the report here, and it's going to look at all dates through the system. I can restrict it down. I can do it by business unit. In this particular case, I'm going to go through the whole dates. Okay, I'm going to run the report. There's some things I'll do once it's in this format. I'm going to watch for it to process and come up here, and then once it does come up, I'm going to automatically, in this circumstance, for what I want to do, I'm going to push it out to Excel. There at Excel, I'm going to go ahead and open in Excel. And depending on your settings or your workstation, it's going to ask you a question up here, open or whatever else. I do want it to open. Now, automatically when I open it, it's in a CSV or Excel formula. I automatically go and save it right away. I'm not going to show you that right now because, it depends on where you want to save it. But save it and give it a date if necessary and what the date range was run for. First, I also want to tell you that you see a lot of shading going on here because I'm using real data and I have to protect that data. It's real, and the time it would take me to make it anonymous is great. So I'm kind of taking a shortcut to it. First thing I like to do is this Excel. I'm going to be looking at this a lot. I like to highlight the top row, come over here to View, and freeze the top pane. Now, top row. Now, this is My Agency Report, so it gives some shading automatically in here. But what I also want to do is that I want to make this easier to look at, so I can make the cells smaller or bigger. I automatically come here and I go to Home and I say Wrap the Text, Left Justify, Top. Does a little formatting thing just to make my life a little easier, and then I can go ahead and make some of the cells smaller as I need to, depending what they are. Like for example, customer number, I need that real estate, so I'm going to make that smaller, expand it out. That's the last of the customizations I'm going to do, but I just want you to be aware of them. Whoops, why didn't that fix up like I wanted it to? Interesting. Let me go fix that up again. Wrap text. That's why I turned it off at some point accidentally. There it is. Now it's back. So I might change some more of those. And then the first thing I want to do is I'm going to look for the active column. You capture a lot of data here. We're going to talk about some of these fields in just a minute, so bear with me. And I'm going to make my life easier. I'm going to highlight the top row, Control F, and say active customer, column N. N is Nancy. And so I have put the filters up there earlier. They came in automatically, and I'm going to say I want yes only. I don't want the no's in there. If not an active customer, I probably don't care about it. I'm going to, down the road, maybe later, we say something different, okay? So I'm going to make that column a little shorter as well, just to make my life easier. Okay, and then what I'm going to do is start looking through a couple other things. So first I'm going to say, what criteria do I want to look at that's both on commercial and personal customers? And what criteria is only on customers that are personal and customers commercial. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to come over and I can look at the customer name. And again, I got this stuff shaded. So I might look in here into this for anything that is all capitalized. And if it's all capitalized, depending on my agency standards, then I might want to change those or mark them. Now do realize it has duplicates of customers, so let me do another thing there. So I'm going to come in here, I'm going to highlight the whole thing, I'm going to say data, and oops, I don't need to do that. I'm going to click over here, come to data, and I'm going to say remove duplicates, and then by what? I'm going to unselect all, and I'm going to say customer number. Now, why would I say customer number and not customer name? Because some agencies create duplicate customers, if you will, for commercial lines, particularly for standard policies, GL, business auto, work comp, things like that, and then might have a separate for benefits and might have a separate for bonds or surety. That's a way not to get that confusion. Plus, it's possible to have similar names or the same names, especially in areas where there's a heavy population, say Hispanic, where I'm located in Southern California. If I do Juan Torres, I might have two Juan Torreses that are not related, not the same one. So the customer number is unique. So I'm going to remove that data. Now, that cuts my data list down. It tells me there were 11,884 duplicates and 13,000 remain. That's a huge data set, by the way, still. So I'm going to restrict that now. Now, what I'm going to look for are things that I care about in both, like I said. I'm going to look for, now again, I have this shaded so you can't quite see it, but this one here, and here's another one, they're all caps. Again, data is shaded, but you get the concept. If it's all caps, it's not necessarily anything wrong with that. That just means if it goes out on a certificate, it goes out on a formatted or a auto-filled Word document or form letter, it's going to be all caps. So I might want to correct that. So I might label those. And how might I label them? A couple different ways. But I could just manually label these. Now this is where it gets a little tedious. And so I might manually label them a certain color. Okay. I also would look for missing. Now here, customer name, not going to see any missings normally. Okay, if you do, you got a bigger problem and look for those missings. Now how might I find missings? I might come here and I might look for the blanks only. And this one doesn't have any blanks. Perfect. Okay, so next I might go for is I got my contact title, contact name, formal citation, and informal citation. If your agency uses those fields and cares about those fields, I'm looking for blanks. Now, what I like to do for that type of thing, now this is again subjective, but the concepts are what I want you to understand. I'm marking a whole range here. And then I'm going to use some other tools to save myself a whole lot of work. Okay, I'm going to drag this over a little bit. Now this is one that you might change, or might only look at by customer type, personal or commercial. But I'm going to show you the concept, and we're going to use this multiple times. So I'm going to go to contact name here. I'm going to go to conditional formatting. And I'm going to say to create a new rule. So when I get here, there's a bunch of options. And I'm going to do the ones that says only cells that contain. And then I'm going to come down here to the value, cell value, and I'm going to look for blanks. And then I tell it what color. I can use whatever color I want. When I'm looking at one to change, you saw me do earlier, I mark it in amber. I kind of think the stoplight type thing. Red, green, yellow. So in my case, red's too crazy and yellow is amber like a street light. So I'm going to pick pink here. Now I hit the format. And then I'm going to come over here and say fill, and I'm going to go to more colors. I use this pink a lot, so I know where it's at. Select the pink or whatever color. I could use any of these colors as well, but I'm going to say OK. And then I'm going to say OK here. And look what it did, all the ranges. Now, I could do the same thing across multiple ranges, like salutations and all that. I just showed it to you on one, okay? Now the other thing I like to do a lot is I look over here to see if there are any blanks on customer address 1. This is the mailing address for the customer. And I might go all the way down and I'm looking for blanks. So I'm going to tell it to unclick all. I mean, I could do it this way, unclick all, so select all, unselect all, go down to blanks. But again, come down here. I'm still in home, conditional formatting, new rule. Only to contain, cell value. I want blanks, format, and then my more colors, pink, say OK. Now why is that OK and then OK again? And why is that important? Because if you don't have a mailing address there, then how are they going to get mail, so to speak? Or remember, that's also the address that merges to forms, accord forms, certificates, EPIs, cancellations, form letters. Go to there. So I might also look for other things here, like I'm going to look here, I'm going to scroll over. What I could look at over here, you can't see it again, I'm privatizing the data a little bit, but this one has an address with a lowercase n for north. There's probably some way to do that with Excel formatting. I haven't found it, I haven't bothered looking for it, but I might mark that too because I noticed it. I'm going to mark that with that orange, amber. Okay, so I'm looking for that. I would do the same thing I did there for blank values. I'm going to say customer city and customer state. Again, I can select multiple ranges. I just want you to see me doing it multiple times. Contain blanks. I'm going to format to my favorite pink. Say OK, OK, and OK, and then I can see if there's any pinks. Now, you're saying I'm going to scroll through 13,000 rows or 11,000 rows, whatever it is. No, you can come up over here and say sort by color. Okay, now I'm going to reverse that sort and say sort by color. Oh, so it didn't find any. There were none missing there. But over here, I can say sort by color again. And there I see, oops, it's sorting. Oh, that's because I'm not at the top. That's why. Oh, okay, get back up there. There we go. Now we're seeing the pinks, blank pinks. Okay, so I can continue across however I want. Now, remember, we're filtering or only active customers at the moment. Now I may move over to the email. If you're getting ready to do an email campaign, or you're starting to use like Vertfor Client Communications or Client Circle or any other system, this is a way to see on the customer level missing contact emails. Same concept. I'm going to move over now to a couple different things. Now I'm skipping over some fields to look at because, for example, zip code is an important one. I probably don't care about county, and one reason I don't care about county, that's the county of what? A commercial lines account or even a personal lines account might have multiple counties. So searching by a county under the customer information, for me, it doesn't work. It doesn't bother me, I should say. So I might look for the customer numbers, the phone numbers, and all that. But one of the reasons I'm coming over here, and I'm going to come to customer type, I should have done that first. I don't care about prospects, and I don't care about suspects. Now I'm limiting that down. Okay, maybe I want to look at other numbers there. Okay, the other thing I want to look for is it an active customer? I don't care about the data for an active customer typically. So I'm going to come over here to column N for active customer and say yes. That way, everything else I do is only going to show me my active customer information. Okay, now that we have our formatting, conditional formatting, we're going to do some more perhaps, but we have the pink colors and all that, and I want to somehow count these items. Now, there's a couple different ways to do this. There's some formulas. The problem with using a formula to count the blank rows or count the rows marked by pink is that as you do other filtering later on, the count disappears, or the count doesn't update, I should say. It remains constant at the bottom of the row of cells, or the column of cells. So what I like to do is I like to go up to the top of the column I'm going to work on, and I'm going to hit filtering, and then I'm going to unselect select all, and then I'm going to go all the way to the bottom and tell it to select blanks. Now, that gets me, I showed that to you earlier, that gets me this. But how do I count those? So here's how I would count them. I'm going to come in here and I'm going to type the word blank. Okay, or some other qualifying word. Now, you'll notice as you do that it does change the conditional formatting, unfortunately, because the cell is no longer blank. Okay, so what I have to do then is I got to go manually change it back to blank to pink, and then I can use that drop down to flow it all the way down. Now I have a word in there, it's blank. And then I can go create a pivot table. Now I'm going to do this in multiple columns normally. Right now I'm just going to show it to you in one column of data, so that way you get the concept and you can see it later. So I'm going to go to enter pivot table. If you're not familiar with pivot tables is a way to see the tree for the forest or the leaves on a tree. If that analogy makes sense, hopefully it does. Okay. So now I'm going to copy those down like I did there. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to click the top of, to the left of A and above row number 1 on the top left corner here. Then I'm going to go to Insert ribbon. Then instead of clicking the bottom, always click the top. And then since I already selected my range of data, all I do is say OK here. Now, I can now see all my columns over here and what I want. So First thing I want is I need something to count by. So what I'm going to start with my counting by, or so I can see where the missings are, is the customer number. So I'm going to put that customer number down here in rows, and I got values over there. I don't necessarily need those values there for the moment. So then I'm going to do my column that I did it in. I did under contact name here. I'm going to put that there, and I'm going to see the data coming in. Now, of course, I've hidden some of it here. And then I'm going to put that contact name back up here under filters. And then a couple times because of the way it is, but I want to just get the main blank, which is blank there. I delete the blanks in parentheses, say okay, and there I'll see my blanks. And this is how I can get a little bit of a count. There's 22 of them, 22 blanks. So I could take that stuff into there. There is a way to use a formula to count the number of blanks and count the coloring, but it just depends on what you're trying to do and sum up. The problem with using summing on these columns is that when you change the filters, the summing doesn't change. So that's why I use the pivot tables and the filtering to get those blanks and those things I'm looking for. That means I have to have multiple pivot tables depending on what I'm looking for. But again, I could come over here and do conditional formatting in any other blanks that I have and put those in and capture them and see what I have blanks and what I have to clean up. That's the first part of the conversation, how to use this report to find blanks. I didn't go through all the fields I look for. I just went over concepts and some common fields that I look for. The key is, now what do you do with that information? Well, let's talk about a couple different ways you can do it. You could task that out to somebody. Winter break's coming up here, at least on my calendar. I'm doing this in the last days of October 2025. If you're doing this during the spring, maybe you got spring break, or summer, you got summer break, and maybe you get a college student in or a high school student in and show them how to get this information. That's a little bit tedious. You could also take another staff member, maybe a receptionist, and fill this in. Now, some of it's easy to get, state for example. Others are a little harder to get. You might have to do some other detail searching. There's a couple different tools you can use, but you'll have to reach out and tell your clients what you need. Like for example, customer email. It might be there in another field inside the customer, like in policy contacts. It might be there. You might find in activities. It takes a little work to do that. You could also send it to an offshore VA if you have a VA, Cover Desk or Staff Bloom or anybody else. There's a bunch of them and have a lower value. They need to know how to get that information, or you need to give it to them. And sometimes it's easy, you know, like state. You could probably fill state in manually by searching by zip codes, you know, filtering by zip codes or filtering city or things like that. Or maybe you only do business in one state. But remember, this is a mailing address technically, so you might have somebody that owns a location in your city and state, but they actually are in a different city or a different state, you know, so those of you along the borders or in smaller corners of states. There's a lot of those I see, especially in the tri-state area in New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut. I hear that a lot. You know, they're spread out. They're not that, you know, might be in a 50-mile range in your different state, which is a small range. So those are some ways to get them. But some things you can use also, like for especially the NAICS code missing, is you could go out and use a service. Fenris is one, and the other one's name's escaping my brain at the moment, that you could put these in and it could search those out and find them. There are a couple data cleanup services that are available that can do that. That's a bigger conversation that can give you that kind of information, how to get that in. That does require some services for fee. Again, you got to have the data. Somebody got to populate this list for the missing items, and then it can go in and correct those using the web services API features of AMS360. If you would like an introduction to one of those resources who can use the API to get data into your system, please let me know. I have a couple in my pocket that would be happy to talk to you and happy to make an introduction to. And then on a go-forward basis, run this report. It depends on your agency. If you do a lot of new business, maybe once a month. If you don't do a lot of business or a moderate amount, maybe once a month's too frequent, once a quarter, and you can catch that information that's missing. And one field that I'll add to reminding you about, let me go find this. I'm going to go to the first row and search, Control F. Added, find all, there it is. There is a field, column Y. Matter of fact, I don't delete rows or columns. I do hide them sometimes, okay? So column Y should be a consistent one and the date the customer was added. Then you can go and see where that was. I will caution you, the date customer added, be careful. Don't think that that's the date the customer became a customer of yours, because if you were using the old prospects and suspects that's still out there and you're using lead list import, you might have added that customer in as a prospect in 2018, but you didn't write anything for them for the first 2 or 3 years. And finally, 3 years later, 2021, you started writing for them. So just be careful for that field. It doesn't mean that you started writing their business that month, that year. Okay, just keep that in mind. Just like to remind you that. So you could, like I said, run this on a frequent basis and look for it. As you get further along in the process, this should be cleaner. Should be cleaner. That's the goal here, finding things that are missing. I'll point out a couple more columns to think about if you're using cross references, if you're using profile questions. You know, different agencies have different ones. And those are over there, so you can see those profile questions that they're missing. Some agencies have required profile questions. I have seen agencies that use profile questions, say commercial personal. Not the best way of doing it, but it is a way of doing it. So just think about. And then finally, I'm going to come back out all the way to the end. So if you're using electronic delivery, and if you're using the preferred method, that's hard for me to say, preferred method distribution fields, maybe you're starting to use those. There's a way of finding out if those are there. So there's a lot of fields in this thing. There's I don't know, that looked like about 40 fields, maybe a little less, maybe a little more, that are available data there that you can see and use to determine where you're getting at. And why is that electronic delivery or the marketing solicitation? Those two are for states like New York and California now starting to this about no contacts or permission to contact. That's a bigger conversation for another day, but those are some fields you can use on the customer level. I wish they were visible easier than they are. Maybe with the agency one rollout and the new fields or displays are giving us, maybe it will be there eventually. Not there yet that I'm aware of. There's some new fields coming out or some new updates coming out soon, and I'm not on that committee, unfortunately. So that's it for today. Hopefully that was helpful for you. Thanks a lot.
Hi there. Thank you for watching that video. Hope it was informative for you. Just a reminder, please go to my webpage, ins-automation.com, and check out the other resources there, including if you're not a member of this newsletter already, where this originally came from, you can click on the newsletter, sign up there, and take you there. If you hit the contact over here, it'll allow you to send a message to me or book a consultation meeting, a complimentary consultation meeting. As well, you can go to YouTube and search for Insurance Agency Automation Associates. You'll see that little Rubik's Cube type thing. If you can, and you'll see my other videos here. There's about 20 or so of them here. I'll open that up a bit broader. There's a bunch of videos here about AMS360 features and tools. If you do come here, please be sure to hit the subscribe button. And then once you hit subscribe, be sure to say notifications all. So that way, anytime I release a new video, you'll get a notification. Thank you again. Have a great day.